at the end of the day, we sort of think about software as this thing that's just out there, and we don't think about it as something that actually should be high quality, that we shouldn't have to be in this constant patch cycle on, right?
We don't have a cybersecurity problem at the moment. We have a software quality problem. So perhaps you can talk about that, because it seems crazy to me. If I buy a car, I expect it to function as a car.
Yeah.
It's not my fault if there's a problem with the car. The manufacturer is supposed to have seat belts, supposed to have stuff to protect me.
Yeah.
But with software, well, how's it my fault?
I do think, David, that the next couple of years, we're in for it. I mean, we're already seeing crazy things like agents going rogue, doing things that human operators did not intend them to do. Just yesterday, there were things released about agents that were trying to socially engineer GitHub folks to actually put a malicious package.
Everyone, David Bombal back with a very special guest. Jen, great to have you on the show.
Yeah, so great to be with you.
You're really well known in the cybersecurity sphere. You've done so many things, and we could spend a long time talking about all the amazing things you've done in your career. But perhaps you can just give us some highlights of things that were really special to you, or that have made an impact on your life, or that changed your life, so that we can inspire people watching, that they can change their lives through things that you do.
Well, first, it's great to be here with you. Thanks for everything you've done. So, I've had a very long career, but the vast majority of that time was spent in uniform. Right after my 18th birthday, I entered the gates of West Point, raised my right hand to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and somewhat unexpectedly, because I think I probably would have been voted most likely to get out of the Army as soon as I could. I ended up being in uniform for the next 26 years.
Oh, wow.
And I think part of that was just the love of being a soldier and being around soldiers and the love of service. So had an opportunity to serve in command positions and staff positions as a military intelligence officer doing cyber. I was in Bosnia. I was in Kosovo. I was in Haiti. I was twice in Iraq, in Afghanistan. And every opportunity was about making impact and about service and about learning and about gaining a real love for technology, which is what landed me in my current role. But if I think about my career, it was really about my time being a military officer.
So you worked at the NSA?
Yeah.
You were in charge of CISA?
Yeah.
You're at RSAC now? You're in charge of that now?
I am indeed.
So tell us a bit about that, because that's like a new change.
It's super interesting. So I went to NSA as a major in the Army, actually. I was there from 2004. I had left the White House. I was serving as the executive assistant to the National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice. And that was during the Bush administration. So it was a pretty intense time, as you can imagine, right after 9/11. So went to Fort Meade to NSA, obviously the largest and most powerful intelligence agency in the world. Went there from 2004, was there as an Army officer until 2011. And then I became a senior civilian. So worked there, deployed several times, worked in what's called tailored access operations, which is sort of the center of gravity of the elite hacking team at NSA. And then after I left NSA, I actually went to the White House again to serve as the head of counterterrorism. That was a crazy time, David. It was from 2013 to 2016. So the rise of ISIS.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out, actually, interestingly, how to prevent ISIS from being able to weaponize technology for recruitment and radicalization. So did a lot working with the technology community then. And then after I left the White House, I went to Morgan Stanley for about 5 years, and then went to CISA. And after CISA, here I am at RSAC. So gosh, it makes it sound like I can't keep a job.
No, it just sounds like you're making impact wherever you go. That's the way I look at it.
That's a generous way of looking at it. But, at the end of the day, it's been a treat. It's been fun and it's been challenging, but I've really been very privileged to be able to make an impact.
Talk to your younger self, or to someone, like you said, 18. Talk to someone who's younger, perhaps 20s, teenager or 30s. Like, what's your biggest advice to your younger self, or someone who wants to become like you?
Yeah, I think it's so much harder to be a kid these days. As I was saying earlier, I have a 21-year-old, and I grew up in a world without social media. I grew up in a world without constant scrutiny, and I think it makes it really, really hard, frankly. In some ways, I sort of welcome a little bit of the techlash in that kids are spending less time with technology and hopefully more time with friends. But, at the end of the day, I always think about when I was probably graduating from West Point. And, this probably gives you a little bit too much of my psychology. But look, I went to West Point in the late 80s. I was the 10th graduating class of women.
Wow.
And there were about 9% women.
Yeah.
And we had a huge attrition rate. And, frankly, to be successful back then as a woman in the military, to be taken seriously, you had to be, smart as, fast as strong as capable as all the rest of the guys. And in some ways, you had to put on that body armor, both the physical body armor as well as the emotional body armor. And so I spent a lot of time, I think, in not necessarily being able to be the authentic person that I really am. Sort of in the past 10 years, I've been able to kind of be myself a little bit more. And frankly, I think it's made me a better teammate, a better mom, and a better leader. And so if I had to look back on myself back then, I would have said, at the end of the day, the reason people want to be around you, the reason they want to follow you, the reason that they admire you is because of who you are.
Yep.
So, be that person and you'll be successful no matter what you do.
I love that. Like someone made it, I can't remember who said it, but their quote is something like, there's only one of you, so be yourself, right? Don't try and be someone else.
I hadn't heard that, but I like it.
Yeah, like be who you are, because
be who you are.
There's already someone who's someone else already, so be yourself. So be true to yourself is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds so obvious and so simple at the end of the day, but so many of us go through the world like, uncomfortable in our own skin. And I realize that it takes a while to actually get that sense of comfort. But the sooner you get that sense of comfort and you believe in yourself, I think other people will believe in you. It's very hard for people to believe in you, to want to follow you, unless they understand who you are and kind of know that who you're projecting into the world is truly your authentic self.
You've worked with a lot of really intelligent, amazing hackers, cybersecurity professionals. So I want to ask you two questions. What's your advice to cybersecurity professionals or like ethical hackers? And you were in a lot of leadership positions. So what's your advice as a leader? So perhaps you can cover both of those. Like, what's your advice to, say, technical people? Because perhaps they don't focus enough on their leadership part, and then what's your advice to leadership or people in leadership who have to manage these really technical people?
Yeah. So I'll answer both those questions with a little bit of a story.
Great. That's great. Love stories.
So when I was young, I like to say I grew up in a house of cards. So my whole family, we were crazy like card players, right? Loved to play card games, loved to play board games. I was this little arcade kid that, was all about the arcades back then. I loved video games and I love puzzles. And at the age of 10, I became totally obsessed with the Rubik's Cube.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Completely obsessed with solving this thing. And this was before the internet. So it took me a while to solve this thing, but I was able to get it down to under 2 minutes.
Wow.
10-year-old kid, under 2 minutes. And so then I would go around to the brick and mortar toy stores and I would make a bet with the owner or the clerk, hey, if I can solve this thing in less than 2 minutes, will you give me a free one? Right. Now, of course, you can probably go on YouTube today and see a 3-year-old girl solving the Rubik's Cube with her toes in 16.7 seconds. But back then,
it was something,
2 minutes was a big deal. It actually took Erno Rubik a full month to solve the cube and he invented it. Wow. So I was able to amass this collection of Rubik's Cubes, but it's kind of amazing. I still think back to that period of time as the people looking at this little kid, not believing that I could actually solve this puzzle. And it told me a lot from a very young age about defying stereotypes and setting very high expectations. And then fundamentally, something my parents had given me from a very young age, which is if you can imagine something, you can achieve it. Right. And I've taken that with me throughout my entire life. And it seems pretty simplistic, but it's a way of approaching your life. It's a way of approaching your career, a way of approaching every single problem. And it was really powerfully reinforced after 9/11 when I was working, as I mentioned earlier, for the National Security Advisor. Because one of the last things I did, David, before going off to NSA was to go with her as she testified to the 9/11 Commission.
Wow.
And folks should read that book because it's one of the best books about national security, about threats. And I think the canonical line from that period of time was said by the vice chairman of the commission. It was, on that September day, we were unprepared. We did not grasp the magnitude of a threat that had been growing for some considerable period of time. It was a failure of policing, a failure of management, a failure of capability, but above all, a failure of imagination. And that hit me like a lightning bolt because it just reinforced everything that I had believed since I was very, very young. And so I think the imagination, right? The creativity, and that's what I love about hackers. Because it's this drive to solve problems and to do it in this incredibly imaginative way. And so it's kind of, as I've said many times, the most exciting time to be in our field. Why? And I don't think I could have said this at last year's Black Hat, but we are at this point where cyber and AI are inextricably linked. You can't have effective cyber capabilities without AI, and AI will not be the engine of innovation and cybersecurity unless these very powerful capabilities are built and designed to be secure. And the flip side of building something secure is knowing how to hack into it. And it's the creativity and the imagination and the problem solving that I love about being in this field. When I was I stood up in command of the Army's first cyber operations battalion. So that was a battalion of hackers. And I love to be around young people who are always looking at the unconventional way. And so be very purposeful about continuing to hone your imagination and to look at the most creative way to solve problems.
You mentioned it now, and I want to latch onto this word that you said, secure. So I believe you've said this, that we don't have a cybersecurity problem at the moment. We have a software quality problem. So perhaps you can talk about that, because it seems crazy to me. If I buy a car, I expect it to function as a car. It's not my fault if there's a problem with the car. The manufacturer is supposed to have seatbelts, supposed to have stuff to protect me. But with software, well, how's it my fault?
Yeah, I mean, that is really the core question. I spent so much time working on this with my teammates at CISA when I was the director there. And it's super interesting, right? Because we spent a lot of time glorifying villains. So you walk the floor at Black Hat and you see all these sexy, glamorized, threat actors with all these crazy names. And it really is a form of glorification, right?
Fancy bear,
and
what?
Cozy bear, fancy bear, midnight spider, wizard, whatever, right? We should be calling them, dirty scumbag or scrawny nuisance or weak weasel. I mean, we should stop calling them these glamorized names. So we do that. We spend a lot of time blaming victims, right, for failing to patch their software or failing to use multi-factor authentication. What we don't spend a lot of time doing is holding vendors accountable for creating insecure products. And having looked at this for decades now, the vast majority of hacks happen because of vulnerabilities that were way too easily exploitable. In fact, the whole name vulnerability, I think, is wrong. We should, to your point about cars, we should call them defects. Just like product defects at the end of the day. Because, I mean, the truth is, and this all comes down to economics, because of misaligned economic incentives, technology manufacturers have for decades been allowed to develop and deliver essentially flawed, defective, insecure software. Why? Because they were able to prioritize getting that product to market first. Right? Features, convenience, driving down cost, all over security. Security was always a bolt-on. That's what created the multi-billion-dollar cybersecurity aftermarket. And so for years, I have argued and tried to champion this idea that technology manufacturers, the vendors responsible for building the software that frankly underpins the critical infrastructure that everybody around the world relies upon for water and power and so much more, they need to design and develop and test and deliver software technology products, AI, that's a whole other conversation, with security as the top priority, and stop shifting the risk onto the individuals, the operators who are not security experts.
Exactly.
Right? So it should be taken care of at the source. I just read a comment, actually, you're going to get me a little bit in my kind of ripped up mode. There's just been attacks against the water supply in states across the U.S. and tentatively attributed to the Iranians. We had this problem when I was at CISA, I think it was in the 2023, 2024 timeframe, where the Iranians went after some small town water supplies, Aliquippa in Pennsylvania. And it was because they were going after the specific product called Unitronics, where there were default passwords and came with default passwords. And, I think it was 11111, something like that. And so very, very easy to get into. But I wrote this article on Sunday about these latest attacks against the water supply. And somebody came back and said, oh, those stupid operators, they didn't change their default passwords. Well, my point is, why doesn't the vendor enforce the change of the default passwords?
Exactly.
Right? Why do you deliver a product? Why do you ship things where you're not forced to change the defaults? Why do you ship things that make it harder and harder on your customers to be able to have a secure product? And so this is like a cultural thing that we need to fundamentally shift. And you talked about cars. I mean, in 1965, Ralph Nader famously wrote the book, Unsafe at Any Speed.
Yeah.
Because back then, everybody was blaming car crashes on the nut behind the wheel. And now we blame hacks on the nut behind the keyboard.
Yep.
So instead of blaming companies for not patching their software, we should ask, why was that software in need of so many urgent patches? Why was it so insecure? Now, the great news is I think we're starting to nudge this problem forward, but it's also one reason to be optimistic about AI. Because if we are able to itself secure the AI as it is being built, and I realize that's a big if, but AI, I think, can fundamentally shift the calculus to defenders if, in fact, these very powerful tools are able to find and fix the defects and flaws, particularly in the legacy code that we have, but also ensure that its code gets written, it gets more secure and more resilient. And so there's a lot of FUD out there. There always is, because it helps to sell stuff. And we're at a big conference here. But at the end of the day, I am a relentless optimist. And I want to believe that we're able to use these very powerful capabilities to finally reduce cyber risk, improve software quality, and to turn ransomware from the multi-trillion-dollar business it is into what it should be, which is a shocking anomaly.
Is it fair to say that the only way that's going to change is if governments mandate stuff or give fines or do something? Because why would I, as an executive in a company, want to, if I can make more money by getting my product to market quicker, why would I spend all my time trying to secure it?
I mean, it's exactly the right question, right? At the end of the day, these companies for years, software manufacturers, were making a rational business economic decision.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. And so it's very interesting when you think about what happened a couple months ago, where one of the frontier labs actually said, oh, we're going to actually constrain this product. This is the whole Project Glasswing. Now, many people talk about that as a brilliant marketing opportunity. I think from a security perspective, it was also a very necessary thing to make sure that there were constraints around who could actually access that. But at the end of the day, how much does it matter given how fast these things are moving, given the power of open weights models that can be downloaded, modified, and used by nefarious actors in very malicious ways? And so to your larger point, yes, I think governments are going to have to definitively at some point in time step in. We have the EU AI Act, which is coming into force. We have the US administration that has been going back and forth in sort of in an ad hoc way. That is a voluntary testing regime. It only affects the frontier labs. It doesn't affect open weights. Look, my big fear on this, and I hate to be a fearmonger, and so I say this with some trepidation, David, is that something really bad is going to have to happen.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this like a month out from the 25th anniversary of 9/11, which many of your listeners probably, were not born
Yeah.
for or
Yeah.
were very, very young, but
Yeah.
it was a significant emotional event
Yep.
in my life. And at the end of the day, I go back to my point earlier, which is there were a lot of warning signs about those attacks. It was a failure to imagine that young men could weaponize technology like airplanes pretty cheaply and kill 3,000 people from some 90 countries around the world. And so, over the past couple of years since ChatGPT 4.0, let's call it, was released a little over 3 years ago, kind of amazing when you think about that was only 3 years ago. Like the AI has rightfully, justifiably captured the world's imagination. I think we can all agree on that. But it is the responsibility of everybody who cares about security to be able to leverage that power of imagination, again, without suffering a failure of imagination. And, the reason why I'm an optimist is not some like fanciful, Pollyanna bullshit. It's really because at the end of the day, I believe in agency. And every one of your listeners has agency to use technology for good or to use technology for evil. The famous quote by Paul Virilio, right? When you invent the ship, you also invent the shipwreck. When you invent the plane, you also invent the plane crash. Technology is neutral. It's how we choose to use it and implement it, right? That decides whether, in fact, we can be secure.
So, Jen, it sounds like it's a really hard uphill battle to get this change. Are you seeing, I think you mentioned you're seeing some signs that this is actually going where it should go?
To the change in terms of implementing some sort of guardrails or regulation around
AI, like secure code, because you can't like blaming the user.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, look, hopefully folks are somewhat familiar with the whole secure by design movement, but we really leaned into this. And so I would highly recommend that your listeners just check out the website on CISA.gov. There's a whole bunch of really interesting technical information around the Secure by Design campaign. What does it actually mean? How do you build secure products from a supplier vendor perspective? We actually did this whole pledge and we did it at RSA in 2024. We didn't know if anybody was going to sign up for it. We started out with about 70 companies that signed the pledge, basically saying that they would take material steps over a period of time across 7 key areas. You can imagine what they were. Things like implementing multi-factor authentication, removing default passwords, putting a memory safety roadmap in place, because the vast majority of exploitable vulnerabilities are all about the rookie stuff.
Yeah.
It's memory safety violations. It's cross-site scripting. It's SQL injection. It's directory traversal. So it's like doing the basics, right? And this is the code piece, like C and C++, that leads to a lot of these memory safety violations. This is where things like Rust, some memory safe code, this is where AI can actually help make a difference. And so we put a lot of these principles and standards on the website. Those are, at the end of the day, voluntary. But I think the good news is, and, I was in a highly regulated industry for many years, and a lot of that regulation was frankly not well done. It led to compliance box checking, not actually operational risk reduction. So I'm not a huge fan of regulation. But I think the EU's Cyber Resilience Act is actually pretty interesting because much of what it asks vendors to do aligns with the Secure by Design principles that we've been putting out for a while now, we've been talking about. And one of the things that it does is it holds vendors responsible and accountable for creating insecure, low quality products, which is what you want.
Exactly.
It's what you expect from your car manufacturer,
exactly.
What you expect when you get on an airplane. It's what you expect from medical products, right? So at the end of the day, we sort of think about software as this thing that's just out there, and we don't think about it as something that actually should be high quality, that we shouldn't have to be in this constant patch cycle on, right? Patching after another, because, we are in this moment right now where, frankly, and this is the other thing, all these flaws and defects I've been talking about until very recently, the ability to actually discover them was constrained by time and resources and attention and skill and expertise, right? And now what we've seen is these increasingly powerful tools really radically compress the time between discovery and weaponization. Everybody's seen the 0-day clock, right? We went from years and months to days and hours, literally, and it could go negative. And so at the end of the day, that really changes much of what we've been thinking and talking about with respect to cybersecurity. And it puts a huge, huge premium on the reduction of vulnerabilities. And actually, in some ways, it's a good thing because it's going to be unacceptable to have a patch Tuesday.
I love that.
Right? Unacceptable
yeah.
for software manufacturers to be providing low quality products because they will get immediately popped. And so this is where I think there's a sense of optimism that in the next couple of years, we will actually see higher quality, whether that's because consumers demand it, whether that is legislation going in place, whether that's AI tools. I do think, David, that the next couple of years, we're in for it. I mean, we're already seeing crazy things like agents going rogue, doing things that human operators did not intend them to do. Just yesterday, there were things released about agents that were trying to socially engineer GitHub folks to actually put a malicious package in the open source library. So I think we're in for a time. And frankly, we do need to absolutely ensure that there are guardrails. We should not leave that to the frontier labs on their own, out of the goodness of their heart to slow down the development of their technology. Governments that are, responsible for protecting their populations need to actually wake up, make sure we're not suffering another failure of imagination, and ensure that these very powerful, very fast moving, somewhat unpredictable, but yet very magical capabilities ultimately are used to serve humanity in powerful and positive ways, not do irreparable harm.
We're out of time. Last question. Is it important for me to attend RSA?
It is so important for you to attend RSA. Look, 2 very different conferences. When I was director of CISA, I always came to all of them. I'm excited about being the CEO of RSA. RSAC is the company that bought RSA a couple years ago. I think when you come, and if you're not going to be there, I will personally make sure you have an invite, David.
Thank you.
It will look and feel a little bit different. I mean, one of the things that I want to do is really emphasize our technical roots, right?
Yep.
Where did RSA come from? It came from cryptography.
Yep.
Right?
Hence the name.
And so that's where it started. I want to get back to our technical roots. I want to make sure that we have the best technical content. Of course, there's a, crazy vendor floor and all of that, but it really is about bringing together the greatest thought leaders and people who have the most compelling content, bringing that together with the community so we can ultimately catalyze a more secure and more resilient technology ecosystem. That's my mission. And it's about catalyzing the community.
Jen, we're out of time again. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. For everyone watching, put questions below. Hopefully we can convince Jen to come back again. And hopefully we'll see you at RSA.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.